Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Genetic Genius podcast. I'm so thrilled to have my guest today, Brandon Gilbert, and we're going to be talking all about tonic herbs, medicinal mushrooms, and much, much more. So make sure you're tuning in today and welcome, Brandon.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
You're welcome. Before we dive deep into the subject down the whole rabbit hole of herbs, so to speak, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, how the audience can get to know you a little bit better? Like, what's your passion? How did you get started? Where to where you are now?
Yeah, so I'm the founder of Hyperion Herbs.com, which I started that company in 2010 because I basically wanted to make really high quality tonic herbs easily available and readily accessible because at that time that was not the case at all. Mostly everything you could get was capsules or not very potent or not very good quality. So I just kind of wanted to make it kind of like for enthusiasts by enthusiasts, like tonic herbs that are potent and you can actually take them because they're in a economical format, basically. So
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of where I'm at now and what I've been doing since 2010. And I'm also really passionate and dedicated to various internal arts like Tai Chi or Qigong and Neigong. It's been pretty much my main passion since like 2014 or so. I've been training almost every day for anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 hours, depending on, where I'm at that day. But that's really been quite transformational and very impactful, very useful. And really, I got interested in Buddhism and Taoism and Eastern philosophy when I was pretty young, probably 13 or something, 13 or 14. And that was just kind of my initial exposure. And then I just followed my interest, followed my passion, and just kind of followed the breadcrumbs, all the way through. And my mindset is always I want to find the most potent, the most effective, the highest quality, the most authentic of anything. Whatever I'm doing, that's always my mindset, for better or worse. Sometimes when my hobbies are rather expensive, then it's not always the best mindset because I'm like, oh, I gotta have the best. Um, but for something like creating products and creating tonic herb extracts and stuff, that's obviously useful. And then for internal arts, especially, and really wanted to understand the systems and the philosophies and the practices that led to the creation of these things. It really is, what's kind of guided me and pushed me along these years. Um, so I kind of feel like in some ways, as I've gotten older, I'm more just the same as I was when I was like a little kid. The more
Mm-hmm.
I realize, like, oh, I'm still just operating under kind of the same things that drove me then are the same things that kind of drive me now.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think sometimes people kind of get more complicated as they get older, where I feel like I just kind of get more simple as I've gotten older. Uh, when I'm just realized like, oh, I'm still pushed and driven and motivated by kind of the same things. It's just, when I was growing up in a small town in Indiana in the 80s, it wasn't like you could just pop down the corner and, learn about this stuff or have
Right.
have any exposure at all. I mean, like where I'm from, the idea of going out to dinner and like eating Indian food is revolutionary. Like I was
Mm.
just talking to one of my friends who still live because I live in Portland, Oregon now, and I was talking to one of my friends who still lives back where I grew up. And it's like it's a huge stress for them to like talk to their family or talk to people there and figure out where they want to go eat because people there like they live in such a small little box and their
Mm.
palate is so small. Their worldview is very small. And it's like anything outside of it, even as trivial as like eating hummus. I remember like years ago, my parents called me and they were like over the moon excited because they had hummus. And I'm like, that's just garbanzo beans and like sesame seed butter like mixed together, right? Like it's not crazy. But to them, it was just this otherworldly, like crazy experience. And I'm like, okay, like cool, I'm happy for you, but I mean, in the grand scheme of things. So I just say that because it kind of illustrates the mindset of,
Mm-hmm.
where I started and where I came from, and also why none of that stuff really resonated or connected with me. I always kind of felt like an outsider. I always felt like I didn't really fit in. I didn't really belong. Nothing really connected or resonated. Um, and it's funny now because when I moved to Portland, I thought all of that stuff would like go away because I'm like, oh, I'm going to like a very progressive, forward thinking place, that's not, small town Midwest. And then I realized like actually no, it's the exact same. I feel pretty much the same degree of like isolation, being an outsider, not being understood here
Mm-hmm.
as I did there. It's just kind of like the other side of the coin. Like whereas there it's very conservative one way, and then over here in Portland it's like very progressive the other way. And I just realized like, oh, people are just people. So that's just kind of where I came from, and some of the things that informed me, and some of the mindsets that really drive me even till this day.
Mm-hmm. That's great, Brandon. And I really like what you said too about, coming from that childhood place and having that love of maybe like Asian arts or
Mhm.
something more, the roots, right? And now coming back to those roots or realizing that roots has been with you all along, but it's where you kind of have that symbiotic relationship, right? It's like, wow, this
Yeah.
is the core. And I think a lot of people, when I work with my patients about, well, what makes you tick? What were you like when you were a child? What made you
Mhm.
happy? Those are the things I think that resonate like in the very core of our being that still make us so happy and who we are for today and forever.
Yeah, 100%. I think, um, yeah, I think for better or worse, people can get disconnected from that. And
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason, I think at least for me, like to say what you're saying, like pretty much nothing made me happy when I was a kid. Like,
Mm.
like in terms of the normal aspects of like the positive side of human emotions, I think I just skipped that whole stage of development just because of like my childhood and the situation that I came out of and just
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So I never even got to experience a lot of that stuff because I was just in a fight or flight survival mode since I was an infant, basically.
Yeah.
So that just kind of like shifted things to one direction. So I never really had the option to depart from those original drivers. I think I tried. I tried going down all these different avenues of like money or women or stimulation or supplements or drugs or whatever crazy
Mm-hmm.
extreme. And I just realized like this is all empty. This is not
Mm-hmm.
really serving me in any way and actually making my health worse. So
Right.
it's like it's sometimes people I'll say like, oh, I have this business I created. I've done these things. And people are like, wow, that's so cool. It's impressive. And I'm like, actually, I had no other options. Like I had nothing else to do. So to me, it was the only option. So I'm like, maybe
Mhm.
that's cool, maybe it isn't. But so yeah, but I think that's a really important thing, and it's cool that you can work with your clients and try to help them. I kind of look at it like sort through the recycling bin. Like
Mhm.
you go in your room and there's just piles of stuff everywhere, and you're just like, this is overwhelming. But then you can kind of organize and put things over here, and then you find some stuff like, oh, I remember this. I had this. I remember this. I used to have this a long time ago, but it just got buried under all this other stuff.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
once you get it a little more organized, you find out, oh, this is what I need. This is what I was looking for. Then that can actually be really, I think, one of the most impactful things for people's health, you know?
Mhm.
Um,
So true. Yeah,
because
so true.
I feel like just as like another kind of tangent, I feel like a lot of what people do, and especially myself for sure, is I would take on these other habits to sort of try to compensate or balance me out for ways in which that I was out of whack with certain other parts of my lifestyle.
Mhm.
And the one way I kind of look at it is like if I just leaned like really far over to the left for a long period of time, right? Like this part of my body is going to get short, this part of my body is going to get tight because it's trying to compensate and like help me find balance or homeostasis in this ultimately distorted position. But then if you transfer the same mechanics over to people's like psychology or their emotional makeup, you're having to do all this work and all this energy and all these extra habits just to kind of like help you function from a kind of a, you know, distorted, crooked place. Whether that's, tons of caffeine or tons of alcohol or marijuana or drugs or whatever else, like sugar, those different things that people have to do to kind of keep themselves in kind of a stimulated state.
Mhm.
Um, so, I mean, maybe that's just me, but I've tried all of those things and I just realized that didn't actually really provide any long-term sustainable benefits. And actually, it's just trying to really is more so just actually trying to come back to find some kind of center, some kind of neutrality. some degree of just being at ease with life and yourself,
Mm-hmm.
which
Yeah,
is
so
kind of,
true.
yeah,
Yeah, we're always working on coming back into that balance, and we're all individuals too. Like what you
yeah,
were saying earlier, with the kind of meditation, Buddhist
mhm,
philosophy, and Tai Chi, that works great for you. But another person could be,
right,
maybe they need, something different, which is, I think, what's great about humans. We're such great
100%.
individuals, but also then as a community, we can survive and thrive together as well. And let's dive deep into some fun herbal talk, which I really love to
Sure.
discuss. And what made you kind of fall in love with herbal medicine? Did you like have this life-changing experience, or were you using it in your own life, or did you witness something with someone else? What kind of, what was your passion, or where did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, definitely was not really in my environment because, no one took herbs in my environment, in my culture. Basically, it was like that was just weird and stupid or didn't do anything. So that's kind of where I came from. But honestly, I don't know if I've ever really shared this that publicly, but I smoked a lot of weed in high school. And
Mm-hmm.
then one day I real one this is kind of what opened the door for like plant and herbal stuff to me is I realized, wait, this is a plant and it's doing something. And I was like, I wonder if there's other plants that do other things. That was
Mm-hmm.
genuinely my thought.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, I think
because
that's true with a lot of people too. I think
Mhm,
whether that's, like you said, like marijuana or some other herb, that they can
mhm,
feel the effects of the plant medicine, and then they're
mhm.
like, well, wow, if I can feel this, what it opens the doorway, like you said, to the
Yeah.
whole herbal plant medicine kingdom, right?
Yeah. So that's kind of like what started. And I think I found out about reishi mushroom in 2004, 2005 or something. And that was like, once I got on reishi, that was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for. And then
Mm,
everything else went away. I stopped smoking weed like immediately. And at that point, I was more so microdosing, which that wasn't even a term back then, but somehow
mhm.
that's what I had evolved to. Because I realized if I just have like the tiniest, most minimal amount, that gives me like all of the effects that I want and none of the effects that I don't. Like I don't
Mm,
even feel high. I just feel more clear and I can focus. So
mhm.
I was like microdosing in like 2004 and it wasn't even a thing yet. Um,
Right.
but once I got onto reishi, I was like, oh, this is what have been looking for. And it just really grabbed me. And then
Mhm.
understanding that there's a whole system of things that you can take when you're already healthy to support balance and help you be more healthy. Kind of like exercise or eating well, but this is something that can work on your immune system or work on your stress response or work on really different, mechanisms within your body, but you can take it regularly over the long term and it
Mhm.
doesn't throw you out of whack or doesn't mess you up. And
Mhm.
especially with reishi, it really had this psychological centering effect, this emotional calming effect that is pretty unique. And for me at that time, combined with the other stuff that I was doing, a lot of yoga and meditation and stuff, it really had a pretty profound impact. And I would fast and take reishi. I was also intermittent fasting back then, which I didn't even know what it was. I just wouldn't eat very much or only eat small meals during a certain window because
Mhm.
I wanted to have a clear system so that I could take reishi or whatever other herb that I was experimenting with and really feel what it was doing in my system without, a bunch of other stuff in there kind of confusing it. Um, so yeah, what reishi is probably what planted the seed for the passion and the inspiration and just kind of really just another one of those things of like I like this and I need to follow it as far as I can take it and
Mm.
see where it comes from because if my mindset is usually like I see this thing and I think it's cool. Okay, but what world did it come out of? And then why did the people that thought this was cool? Why did the people that originally thought this was cool? Why did they think it was cool? And how did
Mhm.
they arrive at that? So I don't want to take it all the way back so I can understand kind of the whole process of development. So that's I have that same process with ideas, concepts, philosophies, herbs, whatever. I always want to take it so I can understand the whole process and see how it developed and changed and made its way through.
Mhm.
That's just kind of always been my mindset. But reishi was definitely something that really garnered my curiosity and my passion early on.
I love that. And for the listeners that are tuning in that don't know what reishi or rishi is, can you enlighten us a little bit about what that is from the plant? It's not really, I wouldn't classify it as a plant medicine, but
Yeah.
it isn't like the overarching category.
Yeah, definitely. So reishi is a traditional Chinese herb that's been used for 5,000 years by most accounts. The first emperor of China had reishi mushroom on his like scepter, on his imperial staff. Like a literal reishi mushroom was on there. It was on his robes. It was all over the Forbidden Palace, and it was like it goes back extremely far within their culture as a literal symbol of longevity and the spiritual potency. Um, but in modern times, we typically classify it as kind of an adaptogen, meaning something that can help your body adapt to stress, but also the herb can adapt to your body. So meaning it doesn't have the same effect on everyone. It can kind of work with your system wherever you're at. So reishi, at least in terms of the immune system, it can have properties that we can call dual directional. So meaning it can bring the immune system up and it can bring it down, which is there's not that many things that can do that. I mean, many of the medicinal mushrooms can, but outside of that category, most herbs, most substances, most things that you encounter kind of just go one direction. They don't
Right.
really have a lot of intelligence or flexibility or in how they interact with your body. And there's also not that many herbs that a person can take regularly over a long period of time without side effects. Whereas reishi is in this elite category for most people. I mean, it doesn't work for everyone because I mean, nothing works for everyone, but it's something that you can, I mean, I've been taking it regularly for 15 years.
Mm.
And I mean, it's just always gives me what I need and keeps, supporting my system. So, and reishi, aside from the immune functions, it can regulate a lot of other things in your body related to your cardiovascular function, your liver function, like pretty much every organ it can work on. But I would say, in a nutshell, what it's most famous for is the immune modulation qualities and the kind of calming, centering effect that it can have on a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love medicinal mushrooms, especially reishi. And I like what you said too about, they're in that kind of different elite category, so to speak, and
Mhm.
that they have a different way that they affect. There's a lot of herbs that you can they can have a detrimental effect on you if you take them in specific quantities, right? And
Right.
I mean, as far as I know, no one has ever like OD'd on taking a specific medicinal mushroom. Now, we're not talking about the psychedelic mushroom world. We're talking about
Exactly.
one. But they do have a different aspect, and they have been, like you said, they've been around for a really long time and
Mhm.
widely studied as well, which
Mhm.
is great from that evidence-based medicine
Yeah.
platform. And it sounds like you use mushrooms on a daily basis. What
Mhm.
about other like plant medicine? Do you use plant medicine on on a daily basis?
Like what, for example?
Well, I don't know. I mean,
Uh,
you're the one over there.
okay.
I mean, like, I
Uh,
don't know, lemon balm, or I don't know,
oh,
what
I see.
ashwagandha. Like, is there something that you use in
Sure.
combination, or are you strictly like, a rotation kind of guy?
Um, I mean, if I have like an acute thing or something, then sometimes I'll do, whatever that I might want to take. I think lately I've been taking milky oat tops,
Hmm.
just to basically kind of support my nervous system specifically.
Hmm.
And that has been actually quite nice, just because my nervous system has been getting worked the last few years, let's say.
Yeah,
Um,
right. You're not the only one.
yeah. But I mean, in general, I mostly stick to the mushrooms, and gynostemma is another herb that I'm really a
Hmm.
huge fan of. I think it's one of the best, if not the best tonic herb, and probably the only herb that I would say is genuinely an adaptogen in the true sense of that word.
Hmm.
Um, and I really like gynostemma because it tastes pretty good. It has a ton of benefits, but it's extremely gentle and extremely mild, and it works for pretty much everyone.
Hmm.
I mean, I've met people that were like, "Oh, I don't like the flavor," but then when I talk to them, they usually way over brew it, Like I did a live stream Q&A last night, and the guy was like, "Oh, I could never get into gynostemma. The taste was just too much." And I'm like, "Well, how much were you doing?" It was like, "Oh, I put a tablespoon in a 12-ounce cup." And I'm like, a tablespoon? Like,
You're like, that's a lot.
I'm like, you need like one or two pinches at most.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
it's just a rolled it looks like a green tea. It's just like a
Hmm.
rolled tea, a loose leaf, and you brew it. And I'm like, a tablespoon. I'm like, yeah, I couldn't drink that either. It's kind of cloying and
Bitter,
not
very
palatable.
bitter.
Yeah, just not
Yes.
not palatable. But other than that, I mean, I think it works for a lot of people. It's very economical. It's easy to use. It tastes good. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, I think it's a great one. It's something that I've taken and used regularly. Yeah, since I found out about it, probably. I think gynostemma, I didn't really get onto it until 2006 or so. But I mean, for 2005, maybe 2006, but even still pretty regularly. So I'd mostly just stick to the mushrooms and gynostemma.
Hmm.
Um, and then if I ever, like I said, have an acute thing, then I'll maybe go to like a Chinese formula. Because a lot of my friends are acupuncturists and herbalists, so I can just call them up and say, "Hey, let me get XYZ formula." Um, but yeah, I keep it pretty simple, pretty basic.
Nice.
Um,
Yeah. And simplicity is good when it comes to herbs because there are so many. So I do like that piece about it. I think, I do a lot of combinations myself, but
mhm.
yeah, when you have an herb or a plant medicine by itself, I think it's very, you have the interconnection, right? Because
Yeah,
you're like really connecting with it as an
mhm,
individual. Now, a lot of
mhm.
herbs are synergistic too. They
Of
work with
course,
other
yeah,
plants, but
yeah,
when I really like to have them as a singular herb a lot too, because then I can
hmm
really appreciate it. I can connect with it. I can connect with a plant and all those pieces. And there are, like you said, some that are really bad tasting. So
hmm
when we combine them with other herbs, and that's the same with mushrooms too. Mushrooms are very bitter, and when you
hmm
combine them with other things, like whether that's coffee or chocolate or
hmm
anything, it does help with the flavor and make it more palatable for
for
the
sure.
average lay person, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what about herbal tonics? So tell us about herbal tonics. What's an herbal tonic in general? Like what classifies an herb as a tonic?
Yeah, I think I mean, there's kind of the classical way it's understood in Chinese medicine, and then there's also kind of our colloquial, kind of modern understanding. And sometimes, like, especially, because I've been doing it since 2005, I guess, especially early on, there was a lot of, and even still, sometimes there's Chinese herbalists that'll get upset because classically Chinese herbalists say, like, you should never take an herb unless it's explicitly prescribed to you for
Mm-hmm.
an explicit thing by a Chinese herbalist. They're like, there's no reason under any circumstances you should take anything else for any other reason. It's like, okay, that's one extreme, and I completely understand why they're saying that. But it's also not necessarily that realistic or practical. And that logic falls apart pretty darn quickly when we understand that, like, things like reishi and cordyceps and goji berries and so many of these other tonic herbs are just used as food. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so for example, I was talking to a friend of mine who lives in Shanghai, China. We were video chatting, and she was just walking around, and we were video chatting and whatever. And she just popped into this like corner store, like 7-Eleven kind of thing. And then they had this like massive herb uh cabinet and their massive like wall of herbs in the back and like a huge bucket of reishi mushrooms next to like the beer and the cigarettes and like the potato chips and everything else, right? So
Right.
she was kind of just playing a game with me and like showing me and say, "Oh, can you guess what this is?" And I was able to guess pretty much everything because it was all pretty common stuff. My
Mm-hmm.
point is that to us, it's like it's this crazy, exotic, like cool, niche superfood kind of thing. Whereas there, it's just like you could just go to 7-Eleven, get a reishi mushroom, take it home and use it or cook it, put it in your
Mm-hmm.
soup, put it in your broth. Like it's just kind of common sense there that you would take something regularly to support your health. Like you're preemptively and proactively keeping your immune system strong. You're not doing something after the fact when you're already sick. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that kind of segues into the idea of a tonic herb. It's when you're already kind of healthy, this is something you can do, kind of like exercise, kind of like eating well, that
Mm-hmm.
if you do it once, it's not really going to do a lot for you. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I exercise on Monday, I'm set for the next 20 years. It's like,
Once a week
yeah,
or
it's
once
not,
a
I
year.
mean, it's
Yeah.
better than nothing, I guess, for sure, but
Mhm.
it's not really going to yield the benefits that we want. So I
Right.
think tonic herbs are kind of a similar idea where you take a little bit regularly over a long period of time, and it just can
Hmm.
support and enhance your health, enhance the function of various organ systems when you're already healthy. Because also, as another caveat, like if you're sick, you typically shouldn't do tonics. Like it's kind of the classical idea. Even
Hmm.
though I think for the mushrooms, that doesn't really, I mean, I'm still kind of, I can see the logic why
Hmm.
they say that, but at the same time, like they're so good for your immune system. And some of my friends that are clinical herbalists, like for their cancer patients, to give them like mass doses of
Hmm.
mushrooms to keep their immune system going.
Hmm.
So it's like, I'm not so sure about that exact train of thought. So that's kind of the idea of a tonic, is that it's something you can do on a regular basis to support and enhance your health. And in order to be into that category, it shouldn't have side effects, and it's not going to like throw your body out in one direction or the other. It should be
Hmm.
fairly gentle, fairly mild, and keep you fairly centered, if used, in reasonable ways. Um,
Right.
so that's kind of the basic idea of a tonic, and I think it's something I wish more people knew about and more people did, because I think just doing some mushrooms on a regular basis, not, I mean, not doing mushrooms, but like taking some medicinal mushrooms on a regular basis, or some gynostem or something, could add a lot of benefit to people's lives, and really kind of, even if it just helps people be sick less, that's definitely a win.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah, that was great. And one thing I really like about herbal tonics in general, I like to think of it as kind of, our body is just we're in an energetic vibration. And so
Right.
when we have, if you're thinking about like one note, maybe that's C or something,
Hmm.
when your body starts to become out of alignment, you like move into that other tone. Maybe it's like a
Hmm.
really high pitched A or something. And then tonics kind of help bring the body back into this energetic tone, right, of alignment, bringing you back into that place of homeostasis, which I think when we're using herbal tonics like on this daily basis, then we have this like it's having that same energetic vibration bringing us back to alignment. And they can be very grounding too, which I think is a really important part of tonic herbs as well.
Hmm. I mean, I think health in general, you pretty much just summed it up. Anything that can help bring you back
Right.
to some place of equilibrium and homeostasis is ultimately I think the goal of most modalities. I think that's just kind of health,
Hmm.
and an important aspect of health, like in a nutshell.
Totally. And one thing I wanted to say about what you were mentioning with the classic piece of
Mm-hmm.
Chinese medicine is I
Mm-hmm.
think that herbal history, there's some pieces of it that have been around for a long period of time all
Mm-hmm.
over the planet, and I think that some of the messages have become distorted over time. And we can definitely, from the Western perspective, as it's gone through different places in the United States, we're seeing like resurgence of specific herbal medicine and the knowledge and the maybe kind of like moving it back into everyday use. So I think when something comes through and you're like, well, that doesn't really make sense that it would be like blank, blank, blank. I'm like, oh, well, it's probably because it got distorted somewhere along the way of that herbal history. That's kind of how I see it.
Right.
Because I know that, herbs and plants, and fungi, they have a huge message to give us.
Mm-hmm.
They want to communicate with us, they want to help us, but we have to be able to listen and tune into them, just like that tonic, right? We have to be able to be on
Yeah.
the same level of communication. And if we're not, the plants are like, well, okay, you can use me, but maybe I'm not going to be for the purpose that you thought I was, or try me again
Yeah.
next time.
Yeah. I mean, especially with even just the history of Chinese medicine, it's definitely a quagmire, to put it lightly. I mean, in terms of the history, because
Hmm.
I mean, a lot of people don't realize it, but traditional Chinese medicine was invented in the 1950s. Like
Mm.
there's literally no such thing as traditional Chinese medicine. And what we have today in America is like, I kind of explain it as, let's say you went into a library and that library contained an encyclopedia on the subject. It just had hundreds of volumes of encyclopedias on this subject. And
Mm-hmm.
then let's say you just grabbed one volume, ripped out 5 or 10 pages. I think that's what we have in modern times. Like that's the degree of understanding of Chinese medicine. And
Mm.
then even if personally, if we talk about like Tai Chi and any of the internal arts, we don't even have that. Like Chinese medicine was much more preserved than any of these other things. At best,
Mhm.
people have like a sentence or a paragraph out of the whole library. This is all people have. Um,
Right. Yeah, it's been diluted, I think too. Yeah, yeah, diluted and fragmented. And I think we have that's a,
yeah,
like history in general. It's a
exactly.
telephone game.
Yeah,
Right.
100%. That's the best. And then the thing is, like, no one agrees on anything. Like, even if you find like, oh, I've cured all disease, someone's gonna be like, yeah, I don't agree with that. Like,
Right.
like no one agrees on anything.
Mhm.
So that's just history.
Right. Yeah, yes, opinions. Yes, they is
Yeah,
what makes our world go round for sure.
exactly.
And so we were talking about like do you take herbs daily? Do you have a daily kind of like ritual that you have? Do you when you're taking herbs, for example, like or mushrooms, do you get up in the morning and you're like, okay, I'm gonna have, this particular mushroom, or do you have it during the day when you're maybe, wanting cognitive focus, or maybe you're taking it at night to help you sleep? Like what's kind of your like daily mushroom ritual?
Yeah, I mean, I think because I've been doing it for so long, I've been on every side of the spectrum. I used to just be drinking tonics all day, every day, and
Hmm.
like, making crazy elixirs with tons of different exotic ingredients and superfoods. And I wrote multiple ebooks with tons of recipes, just with all different types of elixirs for so many different functions and aspects, and
Hmm.
drink tea all day long. I've just done a lot, but these days I'm extremely simple, and I don't honestly take that many things at all anymore. I've really simplified and dialed it down. Also, part of it is that just my health has improved, that I don't actually require things. I can eat less, I sleep less, I don't really get sore that often. I can train hard, I can push myself, I just have a ton more energy and I feel a lot more healthy in general. So I don't require um, as many supplements, which is great. It's
Right.
an amazing. I'm very grateful to be in that position and look forward
Hmm.
to just having even more improvements. So these days, it's just if I have coffee or any hot beverage in the morning, I just put some mushrooms in there. I have a big drawer in my kitchen that has just kilos of different extracts. So do I want reishi? Do I want chaga? Do I want lion's mane, cordyceps, or turkey tail, or any other things that I might be experimenting with? So
Hmm.
I've just pretty much, if I'm making myself a latte or something in the morning, I'll just put some in there, mix it up, and then drink that, or just mix it with hot water and make an instant tea.
Hmm.
Um, or that's pretty much it. I keep it super simple, or sometimes I just eat it out of the bag, like because all my products are concentrated extract powders, so they're ready to go as is.
Hmm.
They don't necessarily require any prep.
Oh,
So
nice.
that's basically what I do now. Is it's very simple. It's kind of boring. It's not very intriguing or interesting. But if you would have talked to me circa 2012, I would have like hit you with dozens of elixir recipes and all kinds of stuff. But I just my mindset now is I just try to keep my stimulation kind of as minimal as possible.
Hmm.
And I'm content to live in that kind of boring, unstimulated state as much as I can.
Well, simplicity, I think, is a great place to be, especially when it
Right.
comes to, like you mentioned, taking lots of supplements. It can be can be deterrent to your pocketbook. Two, I mean, it might not be something that your body really needs. Like a lot of
Sure.
people, especially when I check in with patients, new patients especially, they'll
Yeah.
be taking, having Google be their doctor, which is
Yeah.
definitely not the place to, one, look up an ailment, and then two, to
Yeah.
get a recommendation for a supplement or herb. And so
Right.
they'll be taking things like, oh, I heard blah 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 blah. Like, well, why are you taking that? And like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's what you said is very key, because sometimes your body just doesn't need a lot of different things. Sometimes it
Mhm.
does. also rotating it up can be so
Yeah.
helpful too. You know, it's like, even with medicinal mushrooms, you know, rotating them up. And speaking of medicinal mushrooms, like what would you say are your top 3 medicinal mushrooms, and kind of, you know, what's their purpose, what they're used for, and why are those kind of your top 3?
Sure. I would say, well, I'll do 3
Rishi.
plus. Yeah, exactly. I'll do 3 with a bonus. Um,
Okay.
so like the schema I came up with to really easily understand the mushrooms. So the ones I'll list are reishi, cordyceps, chaga, and lion's mane.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the schema that I came up with is they all have the property to be able to modulate the immune system. That's kind of a given with any of the mushrooms in this category. But each of these ones that I listed, each has their own unique personality that none of the other ones have, right? So reishi has the immune system support plus the anti-stress, calming, kind of stabilizing capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Cordyceps has the immune support plus this kind of vitality supporting capacity where it can increase blood oxygen levels, increase ATP levels, and give people just genuinely a sense of more energy that's not based on stimulation and not based on their fight or flight response, which is a unique sensation because usually what we experience is just some variation of our stress response. And
Mm-hmm.
people call that like energy or emotion or whatever. And then the third one is chaga, which to me has like kind of an extra serving of the immune support because it's such a strong antioxidant.
Mm-hmm.
It has such a strong pigmentation and such a high ORAC value that it's quite potent. So I feel like if someone just wanted immune support, chaga is probably one of the best ones to go because, or the best ones to go with because it doesn't really, it's not calming, it's not energizing, it's just pretty neutral.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't really feel any anything like that. Typically, I mean, it might be slightly calming, but it's not like a sedative or a tranquilizer or anything like that. And then the last one is lion's mane, and lion's mane has the immune support, but it has these really unique cognitive, neurological benefits, being able to stimulate nerve growth factor and brain nerve growth factor, help to break down amyloid plaque in the brain, help
Mm-hmm.
increase overall brain function and cognition and repair the myelin sheath, regenerate the nervous system, like a lot of pretty profound stuff. So for me, how I formulate products, how I just create products or choose things is I'm results oriented at the end of the day. That's all I really care about. I don't care about any of the trimmings, any of the dogma, any of the ideology, any of the other stuff aside with it. I just want the results. So when I create products, I try to have them firstly can continue and carry over the actual personality of that herb, can continue and carry that into the extract. So that's actually, you still get a sense of like, oh, this is the actual plant. But actually doing it in a format that is potent enough to be effective and low dose and just easy and convenient to use.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing is to bring out the unique personality of each one. So I don't really have a one size fits all approach. I don't really have any kind of dogma or rules or stuff about that. I just want the result and I want to reflect that plant and I want to bring out its unique personality. So that's the schema I use to create a product or decide how it should be grown, harvested, extracted, whatever else, because I want to bring out those things because ultimately all I care about is the result. Like,
Mm.
because if each one has a unique kind of personality, then why would I treat them all the same? Like that wouldn't really make sense.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. It's like
so
all your siblings,
yeah,
right? Like they all have a different personality.
exactly. So that's kind of how, just in a very simple, straightforward schema, is how I kind of understand and look at each of those mushrooms.
Love that. And when you were talking about the extraction, what kind of form are the ones that you have with Hyperion?
Mhm.
What is it, a liquid, powder,
They're all powder.
capsule? It's all powder. And
Yeah.
then so you would take that. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of like what that looks like when someone's taking a powder? You kind of mentioned it earlier with yourself,
Yeah.
but what did that look like with kind of like dosing, so to speak? I know everybody's individual,
Yeah.
but what does that look like?
Well, for my products, I always tell people to start with a quarter teaspoon
Mm-hmm.
because I mean they're potent and effective in that low of a dose. And personally, that's pretty much all I take. Sometimes I might take a teaspoon, but I don't really take that much because it's effective. And
Mm-hmm.
I have clients that take a whole range. But just as a general rule of thumb, it's always better to start with less because you can always take
Right.
more, but you can't always
Yes.
take less if you've already taken more.
Right. You
Um,
can't backtrack.
yeah, exactly. And I
Yeah.
mean, at the end of the day, like nothing, it's not like anything bad's going to happen unless you took too much. It's just maybe you have more energy than you're necessarily prepared for, or that you want to have in that moment, or you feel too calm, like, okay, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
But because they're concentrated powder extracts, they're ready to go as is. So on the simplest level, people can add it to hot water, stir it up,
Nice.
have an instant tea, add it to
Mm-hmm.
coffee, add it to tea, put it in smoothies or any kind of blended drink that people are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Put it on top of food if you want to go that crazy, or you can
Mm-hmm.
just eat it
Toast.
out of the bag. Yeah, exactly. Um,
Hummus. Think about on top of hummus.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because I mean, aside from the reishi, the others aren't very bitter, in my
Mm-hmm.
experience.
Mm-hmm.
The reishi is kind of bitter. Chaga is like has kind of like a slightly vanilla flavor because it actually does contain vanillic acid. So it has
Mm-hmm.
a touch of vanilla. I mean, but it's not sweet, obviously. And then cordyceps is kind of like just classically mushroomy and like slightly sour almost. And
Mm-hmm.
then the lion's mane is like kind of, I don't know, kind of chocolatey, sort of.
Yeah, it's kind of
Um,
neutral. Lion's mane, I feel like.
yeah.
Yeah, it
So I
doesn't
mean,
have tons of flavor.
yeah, the one I have is because I focus specifically on the arenacenes and the hericenones.
Mm-hmm.
Like my chaga is black, or not my chaga, my lion's mane is black.
Mm.
Whereas it confuses people because they're like, wait, the mushroom's white. So why is this
Right.
black? Whereas I used to sell just kind of a regular lion's mane and it was like light brown. So obviously when I switched to the one that focused on the herinacenes and aracenones, which are the actual chemicals that are studied and verified to have the nerve growth factor and the cognitive nerve growth factor, which is what I was saying earlier, where I want to bring out the unique aspect of each one.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, that lion's mane I have is a lot darker, and that's why it's a bit more like kind of almost chocolatey.
Yum.
But obviously, like not that exact flavor, but
Right.
in that I don't know universe, I guess. But I'm also kind of just I'm also biased because I can just eat the stuff straight out of the bag and it tastes fine to me.
Right. Yes,
Um,
you become
yeah,
more quote unquote tolerable, or the herb becomes as a if I'll prescribe something to a patient that I know is bitter just because I've had it for a long time, or doesn't taste one,
yeah,
like I always would tell them, like, hey, I like this, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're
yeah,
gonna like it because I have a totally different palate.
exactly.
So if you don't like it, you can mix it in with something that tastes a little bit better.
Hmm.
And when we're talking about the medicinal mushrooms and taking them, how important is sourcing? Because if a mushroom grows out in the wild, and
Right.
when someone's purchasing something, of course, yours sound like they're from a great source. But what about,
Hmm.
do they need to be organic? Do you need to know that where, if you just go to a regular health food store, what is the
Right.
difference between buying something on a shelf there that's in a capsule? All of those pieces.
Yeah. Yeah, those are all, important points. I think actually all my products are organic. I just never actually paid to get the license to put the
It's
little
expensive,
sticker.
right?
Yeah, I mean, especially for so many SKUs for renewing it every year, it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of a hassle. I just honestly never did it, but it is obviously kind of important. You kind of have to trust your source and know them. Because there's a lot of low quality products on the market for sure. I mean, the supplement industry in many ways is like the wild, wild west. I remember there was some news story I saw to where I think it was NPR or something. They went to a health food store and bought a bunch of supplements and herbs off the shelf, and they found that most of them didn't even contain what the label claimed.
It's true.
Um,
Yeah, the fillers. I think there was a study that was done
Yeah.
That most, when you buy a generic brand, especially right off
Yeah.
the shelf, it can be from 25 to 75% filler. And,
100%.
and so if you're trying to take something for a specific use medicinally, that's
Exactly.
not going to cut it, especially
No.
because your body has to, then try to figure out what the filler was and use
Yeah.
it and
That that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about my whole mindset for starting the company in the first place. Because
Mm.
I worked in health food stores, so I saw that. I saw people would have this mindset of like, oh, herbs are dumb or weak or they don't do anything or they don't work. And I'm like, well, those don't work because it's
Right.
mostly filler or whatever, but there are some that can. So I wanted to actually show people like, hey, these can actually work. And
Hmm.
also just from like a practical business standpoint, if you sell a better product that has better effects and results, it's more likely people will want to buy it again because they actually experience like
Exactly.
who knew?
Right.
Um,
Ta-da!
but
Yes, if you have something that works, people will like
yeah.
it.
So definitely, you want to make sure at least that it's an extract. I mean, especially if we're talking about a mushroom, because
Hmm.
mushrooms, like especially reishi and chaga, like they're not digestible. Like you can't just eat it and it's not your system. It's like eating wood or sawdust. It's not going to do anything for you. Lion's mane is a little different because it's culinary. You can eat it like shiitake, maitake, you can eat them. Like that's
Right.
fine. Um, so definitely, concentrated extract is for one, but you just have to watch out to like, especially because there's a lot of brands that are really popular nowadays and they're nationwide and in lots of health food stores. And basically they're just selling like brown rice powder with a little bit of mushrooms in it.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
because because when you just use the mycelium in its unextracted state, but mycelium can only consume about 50% of whatever you grow it on. So if you grow cordyceps mycelium on uh, brown rice, it eats about half of it, then it's done. So then you have to take all the brown rice, grind it up, and now you have 50% rice, 50% cordyceps powder or mycelium powder. So it's like not very potent, not very effective, but it's very cheap, very easy
Right.
to produce. And you can say it's organic, vegan, kosher, gluten-free, keto. Like you can put all the buzzwords on it, and people
Right.
will think, oh, it must be good then. It's free of all these toxins, it's free of all these things, it's clean, it's pure. It's like, yeah, but that's not really the point.
Hmm.
Uh,
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a really important key piece there. And, I think that, like you said earlier, the world of herbs has changed over time and it's not
mhm,
regulated very well and how it can be formulated and what can be put on the
right,
shelf. And so if you're listening out there, making sure you're buying from a source and having it be as pure as possible, right? And
right.
that's why I recommend that my patients, they know where they're getting it from. Like the company
Mhm,
can stand behind and say, yeah, we make this. And sometimes that can be
mhm,
using a company that's smaller, right? Where maybe it's not this massively, it's not all the time, but like a
yeah,
massively produced company where they can stand behind it. You could call them up on the phone and say, yeah, blank blank blank, this is what we put in it, this is how we make it. And in not buying something that's being shipped from a big shipping company where they're not controlling it, the shipping
yeah,
factor, where it's stored, how it's getting to you is also important, I think, too.
yeah. It's just, I guess for me, it's just having someone that knows what they're doing and cares enough to execute on
Hmm.
that. And at least for me, that's what I've always tried to do. I'm pretty lazy. I don't want to deal with any extra hassle that I have to. Like life is hard enough. Let's not make it harder.
Mm.
Um, so my whole thing is like, look, these products are good and I like them. I stand behind them. Like I've been on YouTube for 15 years. I'm a person. You can see me. You can know my name. You can contact me. Like it's about as transparent and straightforward, like I think as you could possibly be. So
Hmm.
that's what I try to create because those are usually the companies that I like that are created by an enthusiast and someone that's really passionate and dedicated to what they're doing and really stands behind it. Um, that's typically what I go for. And also too, I just noticed that a lot of the people that fit that category, they also tend to be kind of like rub a lot of people the wrong way because they care so much about certain things that, they have their kind of their way. And then because I saw that a lot when I was like in the tea world, I would go to tea shops, all over the world. And
Hmm.
actually like the person that owned it was actually pretty rude. Like they would be genuinely rude to you and you're a customer and you're thinking like, why are you rude to me? but it's like, oh, at least in that context. I mean, I don't recommend that as a business strategy. I'm not saying that. It's not what I do. I'm just saying as an example.
Hmm.
So where like I remember when I was in Amsterdam once, and there's a Chinese lady who had this tea shop. It's not there anymore now, but she was like super rude to me for the first hours, insulting me, insulting my character, making fun of white people, making fun of Americans, like all kinds of stuff, right?
Hmm.
But I at that point I knew the game. I knew why she was doing what she was doing. I was just trying to test my character. What are my
Hmm.
intentions? Are my intentions pure? Do I actually care? Do I actually have skill? Do I actually have knowledge? Or am I
Hmm.
just there for some vanity kind of motivation? And then after about an hour of her just insulting me and me here, it completely not reacting and ignoring it, she was like, "Oh, okay." Yeah, like I remember I went to the bathroom and she told a friend of mine, like, "Oh, your friend's like very sensitive and like he really knows a lot about this stuff." And and she's like, "Yeah, exactly. Like it's been his business and his life for like 10 years and whatever." So when I came back, she was like, "Okay, here, let me show you the good stuff." She brought out like all the really good teas, and she was like, "Oh,
Nice.
you should come back tomorrow. You should come back later. How long are you in town?"
Hmm.
Um, so I just noticed over the years, as I've met very skilled people in their craft, they tend
Hmm.
to like that's kind of what I personally like. So I try to bring some of that forth in what I do.
Right.
Obviously,
High standards.
yeah, exactly. And also just like knowing enough and then caring enough to kind of combine those two things.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's really important, and having standards behind what you're selling, right? That
Mhm.
not even if that's in a tea shop or in your herbal company, right? And
Yeah,
I think that that's the piece that we're really honing in on. Is like,
yeah,
making sure that you're buying an herbal product or medicinal mushroom, any product really, but
yeah,
and especially in the healing world, that
yeah,
somebody can stand behind it. They can tell you in whatever time frame that's like. Hopefully it's not a novel, but that they can
yeah.
tell you like, yeah, this is what I do, this is how I get my product, this is why I
Yeah.
stand behind it, this
Hmm.
is what it's going to do for you. And
Right.
you can you can decide whether you want to drink the Kool-Aid or not.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like with most things that we consume, that's, you know, that relationship could be there.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's not really in our culture because everything's replaceable and we're consumers. We want everything instantly and
Mm.
all that. Whereas I think about like traditional Japanese culture. I've watched documentaries where like this family for 600 years, all they've done is this one thing. And they've
Mm.
perfected whether it's soy sauce or miso or wasabi or growing melons or making tea or doing incense. Like they've perfected this thing and it's like the highest quality, but they put so much skill into it. But it's also just when you consume those things, it has a completely different quality and a completely different effect on your body. I mean, I've had teas like that where I just tasted like the tiniest like fingernail amount of this tea or something, and I felt like I was high. Like my
Mm.
whole sense of perception changed and my whole like it just
Hmm.
had this whole other living quality
Right.
that we don't really have in modern times, or yeah, in modern times, especially in our culture, and is I don't think we ever really will.
Hmm.
But I've just been exposed to it from some of these other cultures, so I try to bring some of that across in my products, and I've actually heard that from quite a few of my clients of like, yeah, I really feel, X, Y, and Z from this reishi or whatever. So I think
Hmm.
it's another kind of important point for just things that you're going to consume in general.
Right. Yes. So true. So true.
Yeah,
And as we're wrapping up today, I have a couple
sure.
other little questions.
Mhm.
And okay, so one, if you were on a desert island, what herb would you take with you? If you just have one.
Yeah, probably gynostemma.
Yeah.
It's gonna do so much and
Right.
be, yeah.
Yeah. And what's the common name of that for our listeners?
I think gynostemma is the common.
That's a common name.
I
I thought
think
it was
so. I mean, there's
like
also jiagulan, but like who can
right.
say that?
Right.
Who says jiagulan? I mean, that's like a
That's how I call it.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, and where I live in North Carolina, it's super easy to grow. It grows like
yeah,
basically like a weed. I call it
100%.
like the longevity weed, and
Yeah,
it's super easy to grow. It will grow everywhere, so I always
yep,
recommend to put it in a nice pot, kind of like
yeah,
passion flower, where it won't take over your garden.
yeah,
And
exactly.
it's so easy, like you said. You can use a small amount. I love that can it looks really pretty too.
Hmm.
Maybe on a desert island in the background with your
Yeah.
topiary. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think when we're talking about like the ease of growing something, do you have
Right.
your own garden? What would you recommend somebody growing in their herbal garden? But mushrooms are a little bit harder, but
Yeah,
like from an herb
for sure.
standpoint.
Oh, I mean, definitely holy basil would be a good one.
Love that
Tulsi.
one.
Yeah, super easy. Gynostemma, of course, easy. And then depending on where people are, they could easily grow goji berries as well.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, those are good ones. And lemon balm is another great
Mm.
one.
Mm-hmm.
Any of those kind of like things in sort of the mint family, those will be super easy. But
Mm-hmm.
then you just have to be careful because once they're in, they're in.
Right. Yes, this
Like,
is true. Yes,
yeah.
I there's some I plant in a pot. Mint is one of them, and Tulsi is great. I love how easily it'll reseed itself and come back every year and
Hmm.
multiply. So you do want to have it in a nice spot, and those are the ones that I have in my medicinal garden. That
Yeah.
hands down. Tulsi, lemon balm. I do have peppermint, and they're easy. And so when
Yeah.
I'm recommending what to plant for someone, like plant something that's easy where you basically
Hmm.
don't have to do anything to it
Yeah.
and it will just survive.
100%. Yeah.
Because
It
people are
very.
busy
Yeah,
and they're easy
exactly.
to use too.
Hmm.
And I think like lemon balm is pretty much harmless. There are a couple
Yeah.
contraindications, but most of the ones that you said are pretty harmless. And
Yeah.
in general, as a caveat, or listeners out there, you always want to check with your healthcare provider before
Sure.
starting something new, just in case you are unique.
Exactly.
Yeah. And what about the holidays? Since we're moving into the holidays, and I think people are wondering about their immune system. What about? I know you mentioned medicinal mushrooms for herbs. What
Hmm.
would you say you'd recommend, like for immune support for the holidays?
Uh, yeah, probably the mushrooms. I think that's it's the easiest thing that does the widest array
Mm,
of things and can strengthen your immune system without throwing you out of whack. People take
mhm,
other kind of immune boosters, but those can be really drying or they can be
mm,
overstimulating or they can aggravate certain things. Whereas I feel like, chaga is like a great one. Easy
mhm.
to use, tastes pretty good, like really great for your immune system. But I mean, also the thing is just, being proactive, you know, just
Exactly.
getting on something regularly and just,
Hmm.
a little, you don't have to do a ton, but just a little bit over a long period of time has a lot of benefits.
Hmm.
Also, I think one thing just as like an acute, there's certain like herbal throat sprays. I can't remember a brand, but
Hmm.
I've used it and it'll have like peppermint and garlic and horseradish and a bunch of like very
Right.
pungent things. But I used them last time I traveled and I just, because I went to a workshop and there was like, I don't know, 15 people that had COVID.
Mm.
So I was just like, like,
Right. Yes, immune boosting throat sprays, or yeah, that's a
yeah,
really great one. And or making something on your own, like you said, that it's really you want to have something that's highly antimicrobial and highly
yeah,
antibacterial that you're not going to be using for a long term. Hopefully, you're not
exactly.
surrounded by bacteria and viruses every
Yeah,
moment of your life. And you want your immune system doesn't function that way unless you're like
exactly.
maybe in an autoimmune state. And
Right.
um, where can people find you, follow you,
Hmm.
all of that good stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So my main website is HyperionHerbs.com. And if people have questions about anything, want recommendations, want more information, or anything that I said today that was like, oh, what about this? What about that? They can contact me there through
Great.
the website. I do all my own emails, and so I'll get back to people usually within one or two business days, usually faster. And then my YouTube channel is HyperionTV.com. I have well over 700 videos on there at this point, covering a wide variety of subjects. I mean, tons and tons of videos about the mushrooms and the philosophies of taking
Mhm.
them and how to take them and recipes and then also just a lot of more, let's just say, exploratory conversations about alternative health and psychology and relationships and just these other aspects of life that are also equally as beneficial as what you take and what you eat, etc.
Mhm. That's great. Yeah. And how about social media? Do you have Instagram or Facebook?
Yeah, Hyperion Herbs is also on Instagram, but I haven't been active on there in a while, but I think I'm gonna be getting reactive on there again soon. But it'll mostly just be content from my YouTube channel that's like
Mhm.
spliced and repurposed. So pretty much just YouTube is the main platform that I'm active on.
Okay, great. Well, we'll make sure we put all of that in the show notes. And then you also mentioned that you're going to be doing a special promotion code for all the listeners who want to try some of these amazing medicinal mushrooms. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So if people go to the website hyperionherbs.com and then use the promo code Genius10. So
Genetic.
Genius. Oh yeah, wait.
Genetic.
Yeah. Genetic, the genetic 10,
Yes.
genetic 10, that'll take 10% off their order. So they can just add everything to the shopping cart, and then on checkout there'll be a little box that says promo code. Put in genetic 10 and it'll take 10% off.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. That's a really great way to purchase something fun over the holidays for yourself to boost immune system. Maybe gives your loved one some chaga as a gift, which is a great one. I love that.
Absolutely.
And one last fun question, Brandon. If you had an unlimited budget right now, what would
Mhm.
you do to make the biggest impact on the planet?
Wow.
You're like, oh,
That's
I don't know.
that's a big one.
Mhm.
I think honestly, I don't know exactly what it would be, but it would be definitely trying to get more mushrooms and things like that into people's hands.
Mm,
Some kind of outreach in that capacity. I'd probably travel and teach more. Honestly, if I had a ton of money, I have a list of a bunch of formulas, a bunch of products that I've formulated, but I just haven't necessarily allocated the cash flow to actually have them created. I
mm,
would basically I think I would create some of the best supplements and formulas that the industry has ever seen.
nice.
And I say that with complete confidence. The mushroom formula that I made is absolutely superior to anything that I've ever seen in the industry in the 15 years that I've been in it. I created a cognition, brain enhancing formula, and I feel the exact same way about it. I just haven't released them yet because
Not
of,
yet.
yeah.
So keep
Um,
tuned, everyone.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, I think that's exactly what I would do. Um,
Nice.
yeah. And then also too, I would try to leverage because I have connections for even higher quality herbs and even more esoteric levels of teas and incense and herbs. I would just basically bring those and make those a bit more accessible. But I would also put a a wall in front of there basically and like make sure people actually have the appreciation and the respect for it.
Mm.
Because actually, I briefly had a website where I did sell some insane quality herbs that most people don't even think exist. But I legitimately had to quit selling it because the guy was like, "You're making it too easy for people." They was like, karmically speaking, you had to suffer X, Y, and Z to open these doors, whereas anyone can just go on the internet and buy it. And he was like, "That's really not appropriate. And it's not fair. So you need to take the website down." So
Hmm.
I had to take it down, and I lost like a lot of money as a result, but that's life.
Yeah, maybe well, maybe
But
it'll evolve into something new and different.
yeah, for sure. So I mean, I
Yeah.
think with a lot more resources, I would do a lot of really cool stuff like that, and just try to help a lot of people because unfortunately, a lot of people were quite lost, quite confused,
Mm.
in a lot of pain. And I would try to at least, and I do still to this. I mean, that's my YouTube channel is trying to help people out, but
Hmm.
you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them have insight. So
Well, I love that, Brandon. I think those are really great things that I think that easily you could manifest. So I look forward
that would be
to,
cool.
watching your vision take place. And that's
Mhm.
one fun thing that I really love about the podcast is hearing everyone's vision and seeing
Yeah,
them manifest because that's what we are. We're creators as human beings on this planet. That was one of our jobs. We said, I'm going to come here and I'm going to create and have fun doing it.
hopefully.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, thanks again for joining us today. I loved our conversation and I can't wait to share it with the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on, and it was a lot of fun, and hopefully, shared some value or something that people found interesting or beneficial.